This better not awaken anything in me.
Hello everyone, Skippy here, and welcome to One Piece episode 988, directed by Tasuku Shimaya and supervised by Shuichi Ito. With another round of polished, if not a bit derpy corrections from Ito and what looks like solid animation all around, I have a good feeling that Shimaya will end up nailing 988 as a whole. Sure, we haven't seen too much of his board, and as the strict guideline of an episode mostly, that is a bit of a do or die section, but after 976 was much more than I expected, and it looks like this episode already has a lot more going for it to begin with, we should be in for an enjoyable one, fingers crossed. So will episode 988 be as good, if not better than last week? Let's reignite the flames and find out. This episode covers the remainder of chapter 981 in the first 3-ish pages and pages 8 and 9 of chapter 982. And on paper, that sounds like a major cause for concern. But of course, thankfully due to filler once again, this episode ends up harboring a much more solid pace than you'd think it would. Sure, there are some brief flashbacks here and there that admittedly could have been omitted in favor of just a few more pages being covered, but they don't last for long, and the filler here is of pretty substantial value regardless, like giving Luffy, Zoro, Kid, and Killer lots of stuff to do, so we can see them show off much more and eventually make it to the places that they are in canon in a chapter or two. Which also goes for the more brief bits of added scenes like the small but comedic all the same scene with Ulti in page 1, and Sanji starting off his plan while talking to Carrot, which we can see in an in-canon flashback later on. It all helps not only create that narrative thread once again that the manga seemed to lack in places, but it also brings upon a solid pace for the rest of the manga content's dialogue and scenes, so they don't feel like they're dragging on at all. And even in places like the scene of Kanjuro fighting off the Beast Pirates, allows it some bits of bite-sized cohesion filler too, with the same also being said for Marco's attack on the Big Mom pirate ship that make them look slightly more competent by having them initially fight back against the Whitebeard Pirates commander. Now admittedly, sure, I would have preferred if they covered just a bit more of the Kanjuro arrival if they were really hell-bent on cutting it between two episodes, but regardless of that, I feel like this episode has a surprisingly tight pace thanks to continuing to pepper the episode with the amount of filler needed like last week to really make sure that the content flows well and isn't as slow as molasses. While he may not try as much out there things as he did last time, I'd be hard pressed to say that Shimaya's board here is anything less than what I expect from him. As solid camera shots both high and low that help the scale of any given scene plus readable action storyboarding that helps the small bits of it stand out, the board on display here is pretty good and gets the job done in a smart and well kept way while not doing too much crazy stuff. Not once during my entire viewing of the episode did I ever think that it felt too crowded or not composed well enough. And I do think that speaks to not only Shimaya's skills at hand, but also what he learned from Komaki as a mentor. Understanding that even in episodes like this that don't allow you to go too crazy with certain things, you can still create a more than understandable board that feels premium with cool name cards, color shifts, and a bit more while still holding itself back. And with the added solid backbone of Shuichi Ito's corrections that are as polished as can be to give the episode a clean and thorough look, as well as Tetsuro Nireki's impactful scene with Marco's attack on the ship, and Castlevania alumni Camille bringing a real sense of flowing power to Luffy's reroll with some stylish impact frames, this episode pretty much met my expectations. Shimaya may not be like some of his colleagues, but I feel like his ability to produce consistently solid after consistently solid episode really does speak to his ability. And while it didn't do some of the experimentation that I was a huge fan of from 976, it still turned out a-okay in the end. delivering just the type of episode needed for this content that, despite some small nitpicks, definitely earns its place. Leaving us time for next week's episode 989 from co-series director Kohei Kareta and Hirotaka Ito. It's one thing that we're already getting another Kareta episode so soon compared to the gap between 954 and 978, but the absolute ball that he looks to be having with this content both in canon and filler is something to behold, looking like it's going to amp up on the comedy by an absolutely absurd degree. Couple that with Hirotaka Ito's bold and line work heavy corrections being the absolute low-key best choice for the stuff that Kareta wants to put on display, and it truly looks like we're in for one hell of a time next week. Anyways guys, that's it for now. I'm Skippy, and even with the CG, Shimanuki's kid arm is still getting used.